He had everything money could buy, and that's exactly what was destroying his life. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe, just maybe, your relentless pursuit of always having more is exactly what's leaving you with less? There is a Japanese concept called Seihin, which literally means clean poverty or dignified poverty. But hold on, before you close the video thinking I'm going to ask you to live like a Buddhist monk, let me explain something. Seihin isn't about giving up everything. It's about something different. The mental discipline to choose simplicity in a world that bombards you with the idea that you always need more. And the most interesting part, neuroscientists explain that our brains weren't designed to handle the absurd amount of stimuli, options, and possessions we accumulate in the modern age. Every object in your house, every notification on your phone, every appointment on your calendar is literally consuming your mental energy. A study from Princeton University found that physical clutter in our environment competes for our attention, resulting in decreased performance and increased stress. But today's video story doesn't begin with scientific studies. It begins with a man named Jonah. Before we continue, if you want more content like this that truly makes a difference in your life, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. And comment below, what area of your life is most overwhelming right now? It can be a simple comment, but it will make you reflect. Now, back to the video. Chapter 1. The Overburdened Executive. Jonah was 40 years old and by conventional standards had succeeded in life, a marketing executive at a tech company, 6-figure salary, 200 square meter apartment in an upscale neighborhood, 3 cars in the garage, because he needed one for every occasion, right? A closet full of clothes with tags still attached, a smartwatch that monitored everything, a smart TV in every room, smart light bulbs, smart locks. Even the refrigerator was smart. Ironically, Jonah felt stupid. Every morning, even before getting out of bed, he would check various notifications on his cell phone, work emails at 6:23 a.m., messages from family groups that he never had time to read properly, offers for products he didn't even know existed but that suddenly seemed essential. He would wake up tired, always tired. That kind of tiredness that doesn't go away even after 8 hours of sleep, because it wasn't physical tiredness. It was cognitive exhaustion. The closet was overflowing. Every morning was an agonizing decision. What to wear? What if he needed to go straight to happy hour after work? Better bring an extra change of clothes and a spare pair of sneakers. And breakfast? He had 6 types of granola, 4 brands of imported coffee, 3 types of plant-based milk, but he never knew what to eat. Choice paralysis. In the end, I always ended up grabbing whatever was available on the run and eating it in traffic. The traffic. Oh, the traffic. An hour and a half to travel 15 kilometers. Horns blaring, screeching brakes, people cutting him off, him cursing back, podcasts on his headphones, terrible news on the radio, emails being answered at red lights. When he arrived at the office, already at 9:30 a.m., late as always, Jonah went into autopilot mode. Meetings, spreadsheets, more meetings, phone calls, impossible deadlines, people demanding results, him demanding results from his team, and every few minutes that irresistible urge to check my phone. Instagram, LinkedIn, news, as if something very important could have happened in the last 3 minutes. Lunch? Fast food in front of the computer, without savoring it, without noticing, just swallowing while answering emails. In the afternoon, the energy plummeted. More coffee, a chocolate bar, anything to keep going. When he finally got home, usually after 9 p.m., Jonah could barely hold a coherent conversation. He'd turn on the TV, scroll through Instagram, and somehow, without even realizing it, it was already midnight, and he was buying things on Amazon that he didn't even need. A magnetic organizer for kitchen knives, he never cooked. A premium toolkit, he never fixed anything. An online photography course that would forever remain at 2% completion. Buying gave a momentary feeling of control, as if each new object would fill the void he felt. But what about the next day? The boxes were still piled up in the corner of the room, and the emptiness was still there. Chapter 2. The Breaking Point. It was on an ordinary Tuesday that everything began to change. Jonah was late, again, for an important meeting. He was searching for his car keys amidst the mess on the entryway desk. 2 car keys he no longer used, 3 unfamiliar flash drives, batteries, business cards from people he couldn't remember, 6 remote controls for devices he wasn't even sure still worked. And then, while rummaging through that chaotic drawer, something snapped inside him. It wasn't dramatic. There were no tears or breakdown. It was something more subtle and more frightening. He simply didn't recognize his own life. She looked around the apartment. Really looked. For the first time in months. Shelves overflowing with books he would never read. Gym equipment turned into coat racks. Collections of things he couldn't even remember why he'd started collecting. An entire shelf dedicated to tech gadgets that had been essential for 2 weeks and then forgotten. At that moment, a question flashed through his mind like a bolt of lightning. Do I possess these things, or do these things possess me? He cancelled the meeting. He called in sick to work, and he wasn't lying, not really. There was something wrong there, it just wasn't physical. Jonah spent the entire day sitting on the apartment sofa, just observing, trying to remember the last time he had felt truly light, truly at peace. He couldn't remember. That night, while absent-mindedly scrolling through Instagram, some habits are hard to break, he saw a post from an interior designer he followed. It was about Japandai style, a blend of Japanese minimalism with Scandinavian design. And in the middle of the post there was a photo of a ceramic piece, simple, elegant, intentionally imperfect, and something about that image deeply touched him. Without much thought, Jonah decided he was going to buy an authentic Japanese piece to decorate the apartment, something that would bring that serenity he saw in the photo. It's funny how life works, isn't it? He was still trying to solve the problem by buying things. He still hadn't understood the lesson, but sometimes the cure comes disguised as the disease. Chapter 3. The Craftsman. After searching online, Jonah discovered that there was a traditional Japanese craftsman living on the outskirts of the city. A man named Daisuke, who had moved to the United States 15 years ago and maintained a small workshop where she created ceramics, using centuries-old techniques. The following Saturday, Jonah drove there. The address was on a quiet, tree-lined street, far from the chaos of downtown. When he arrived, he almost thought he had gone to the wrong place. It wasn't a shop. It was a small, simple house with a tiny but impeccably cared-for garden. Stones arranged with intention, a bamboo swaying gently, an atmosphere of calm, deliberate. Jonah rang the doorbell. The door opened and a Japanese man of about 60 years old with grey hair smiled gently. "You must be Jonah. Please come in." Daisuke's voice was soft but firm, the kind of voice of someone who is in no hurry. Jonah walked in and immediately felt the difference. It wasn't just the house. It was as if he had left a noisy avenue and entered a silent forest. The room was almost empty. A tatami mat on the floor, a low wooden table, a single painting on the wall, simple brushstrokes of a mountain and a circle that could be the moon or the sun, a small bookcase with perhaps 20 books, carefully arranged, and nothing more. No TV, no excessive decoration, no noise, visual. "Please sit down," said Daisuke, pointing to a cushion on the floor near the table. Jonah sat down, feeling a little uncomfortable. He wasn't used to so much silence. "You came looking for pottery," said Daisuke, pouring tea into 2 small, delicate cups. "But what are you really looking for?" The question caught Jonah off guard. I saw some of your work online and I thought it was beautiful. I wanted something to decorate my apartment with." Daisuke smiled. It wasn't a condescending smile. It was kind, understanding. "Let me show you the workshop." Chapter 4. The Workshop of the 3 Tools. They walked through a small hallway and arrived at the workshop at the back of the house. Jonah expected to find, well, he wasn't exactly sure. Modern equipment, shelves full of materials, something more elaborate. What he saw confused him. The workshop was smaller than his closet. There was a potter's wheel, an old wooden one operated by a pedal, a simple workbench with 3 tools hanging from it, a bamboo knife, a natural sponge, and a thin wire. That's all. "Is that all?" Jonah asked before he could stop himself. Daisuke picked up a piece of damp clay and sat down in front of the wheel. "To that, do you know that word?" he said calmly. Jonah shook his head. It means dignified poverty or honest frugality. But it's not about being poor. It's about choosing simplicity as a form of mental discipline. Daisuke began working with the clay. His movements were precise, economical, not a single wasted gesture. The wheel turned at a steady, almost hypnotic rhythm. When I was young in Japan, Daisuke continued, without taking his eyes off the piece, I worked for a large industrial ceramics company. We had very expensive machines, dozens of specialized tools, computers that controlled every detail of production. He paused, gently shaping the side of the piece. We were producing 1,000 pieces a day, and I was unhappy. Completely unhappy. Why? Jonah asked, genuinely curious. Because I had forgotten. Because I was creating. Each new tool, each new process, each new technology. All of that stood between me and the clay. Between me and the true purpose of my work. Daisuke picked up the bamboo knife and made a precise cut along the edge of the piece. One day my master, an 80-year-old man who still created pieces by hand, told me something that changed my life. He said, Daisuke-san, you don't need 100 tools. You need 3 tools and 100 hours of practice. Jonah looked at the 3 tools on the wall. And you? Only use those 3. These 3, Daisuke confirmed, and my hands. And this wheel that's almost 100 years old. He took the damp sponge and smoothed the surface of the piece with circular motions. Do you know what happened when I simplified? When I eliminated everything that was unnecessary? What? I started to see again, feeling again. Each piece I create now has soul, has intention, because there is nothing between me and the creation. No distractions, no excesses, only the essential. Daisuke used the wire to separate the piece from the wheel. It was a simple bowl, elegant, imperfect in a deliberate way, the slightly irregular rim, the texture of the clay still visible. But there was something about it, something presence which mass-produced items never have. That's Seihin, Daisuke said, carefully placing the bowl on a shelf to dry. It's not about having less because you're poor. It's about choose less to have more clarity. Chapter 5. The Lesson of the Mind. Daisuke prepared more tea and the two returned to the living room. Let me tell you something about the human brain, Daisuke said, and Jonah was surprised by the change of subject. You think I only know about ceramics, right? Jonah smiled awkwardly. I read a lot, Daisuke continued, and one of the things I've learned is that our brains have a limited capacity for attention. Scientists call it cognitive load. He pointed to the empty room around them. Every object in your field of vision consumes a little bit of your attention. Every choice you have to make, even small choices like which pen to use, consumes a little bit of your mental energy. Jonah thought about his crowded apartment, the chaotic drawers, the impossible closet. There's a researcher named Barry Schwartz who wrote about this, Daisuke continued. He calls it the paradox of choice. The more options you have, the harder it becomes to decide, and the more unhappy you become with the decision you made, because you're always thinking, what if I had chosen differently? That was exactly how Jonah felt every day. Zen monks have always known this, Daisuke said. That's why they live with almost nothing. It's not because they're poor, it's because they understand that external simplicity creates internal clarity. He paused, taking a sip of tea. There is another concept related to Seihin. It's called Mushin, empty mind, or a mind free from distractions. It's the mental state the samurai sought, a clear, focused mind, without noise. And how do you get to this state? Jonah asked. Eliminating the unnecessary, externally and internally. Daisuke stood up and went to the small bookshelf. He pulled out an old notebook and returned. When I moved into this house 10 years ago, I had 3 rooms full of stuff. Books, tools, clothes, gifts I'd received and never used, unfinished projects. He opened the notebook. There were handwritten lists inside. I spent 6 months doing an exercise. Every day I would choose an area of the house and ask myself, is this essential? Does this serve my purpose? Does this bring me real joy or just the illusion of security? And what did you find out? That 90% of my possessions were dead weight, things I kept just in case, things I bought to feel better for a few minutes, things I thought defined me, but that actually only distracted me from who I really was. Jonah felt something tighten in his chest. Recognition. I donated, sold, or threw away almost everything. It was painful at first. Every object seemed important. But you know what happened next? What? I started breathing again. Chapter 6. Seed planted. Jonah left Daisuke's house that day without buying any pottery, but he took something far more valuable, a sense of unease, a seed that had been planted. In the following days, he couldn't stop thinking about Daisuke's words. He began to pay attention to how he felt when he entered the apartment after work. Anxious, suffocated, oppressed. It wasn't the apartment itself, it was the amount of things, the excess, the constant visual noise competing for your attention. The following weekend, Jonah made a decision. He grabbed 3 large boxes and started with the closet. The first rule he set for himself was simple. If I haven't used it in the last 3 months, it's going away. It was brutal and liberating. Designer shirts he never wore because they were too nice for everyday wear. Donation box. Pants that no longer fit, but that he kept in case he lost weight. Donation box. Uncomfortable shoes he had bought just because they were on sale. Donation box. In the end, the closet that had 80 pieces of clothing was left with 25. And do you know what happened the following Monday? Jonah dressed in 2 minutes. No anxiety, no second choice, no more feeling of always wearing the wrong clothes. It was so impactful that he continued. The kitchen. He had 3 stand mixers. 3. 6 pots he never used. Dozens of plastic containers without lids. Kitchen gadgets he'd seen on TV shows and bought on impulse. He kept the essentials. A good pot, a good frying pan, basic, quality utensils. The room. The shelves full of trinkets, work awards that meant nothing, decorations he bought because something was missing there. He removed almost everything. He left only a few pieces that he really liked. The apartment started to breathe. There was space. There was visual silence. And something surprising happened in Jonah's mind. He began to feel lighter, not just physically, mentally, as if each object that left the apartment freed up a little bit of space in his brain. Chapter 7. The Depth of Practice. 3 months later, Jonah returned to Daisuke's house. This time he didn't go as a consumer, he went as a student. I did what you suggested, Jonah said as soon as he entered. I simplified my apartment, and it worked. I feel different. Daisuke smiled. I'm glad. But tell me one thing, did you simply throw things away, or did you reflected? Why had he accumulated all that? The question caught Jonah off guard. I threw it away. Why? Because Seihin isn't just about having fewer things. It's about understanding why you seek excess in the first place. They sat down again in the minimalist room. Let me ask you something, Daisuke said. Why do you buy so much? Jonah was silent for a moment. I don't know. It makes me feel good, I guess. For a while. For a while. And then what? Daisuke repeated, emphasizing the point. Then I feel empty again. And then I buy something else. Exactly, you're using consumption as emotional anesthesia. You're not buying objects. You're trying to buy peace of mind. This hit Jonah like a punch in the gut, because it was true. There's a phrase I really like, Daisuke said. When you realize you don't need anything, you have everything you need. He served tea again. True Seihin goes beyond material simplicity. It is a mental discipline. It's about training your brain to find sufficiency in what you already have, to not seek validation in possessions, to not measure your worth by the amount of things you can buy. And how do you do that? Jonah asked. Practicing mindfulness, Zanshin, a relaxed yet alert state of consciousness. You are fully focused on the present moment, on the task at hand. Daisuke pointed to the window where the small garden was visible. When I tend to the garden, I tend to the garden. I'm not thinking about bills, projects, or worries. I'm there, with my hands in the soil, feeling the texture, seeing the colors, hearing the sounds. This seems impossible to me, Jonah admitted. My mind is always racing. Because you fuel this acceleration, constant notifications, multitasking, perpetual consumption of information and entertainment, your brain is addicted to stimuli. Daisuke picked up his cell phone, a simple, old model. I have a phone, but I don't have social media, I don't receive notifications, I don't read the news all the time. And you know what I gain from that? What? Time to think, time to process, time to simply exist without constantly reacting to something. Chapter 8. Daily Practice. In the following months, Jonah began applying Seihin to other areas of his life. He reduced the number of social commitments. He stopped saying yes to every event, every happy hour, every meeting. He learned that no, it's a complete sentence. His calendar, which had previously been overflowing with appointments, began to have blank spaces. And in those spaces, he discovered something he had forgotten existed: productive boredom. Moments when nothing urgent was happening, when he could simply sit and think, read a book from beginning to end without interruptions, cook a real meal, paying attention to each step. He established a personal rule: one in, one out. If he bought something new, something old had to go. This forced him to question whether he really needed that new item. Most of the time, the answer was no. He also began practicing what Daisuke called digital fasting. An hour before bed, no screens, no emails, no social media. The first few nights were terrible. He didn't know what to do with his own hands. He paced the house like a recovering addict, which in a way was exactly what he was. But after 2 weeks, something changed. He started sleeping better. His mind, which used to race late into the night, began to slow down naturally. He woke up rested for the first time in years. At work, he applied the same principle. He closed 15 tabs that were permanently open in his browser. He uninstalled apps that he compulsively checked. He set specific times to check emails, 3 times a day, no more. His colleagues found it strange at first. "How are you managing to do everything without always being online?" they asked. The answer was simple. He wasn't doing everything. He was doing the what did it matter and doing it well. His productivity, ironically, increased because he was no longer in constant reaction mode, jumping from task to task. He would choose one thing, focus completely on it, finish it, and then move on to the next. Zanshin, full attention. Chapter 9. The Deepest Lesson. 6 months after their first meeting, Jonah and Daisuke had become friends. Jonah visited the workshop regularly. Sometimes he helped Daisuke with small tasks. Sometimes he would just sit and watch the master work at the potter's wheel. There was something meditative about it. The silence, the steady rhythm, the total attention. One day, Daisuke asked, "Did you notice that all my pieces have imperfections?" Jonah looked at the bowls and plates on the shelf. It was true. None of them were perfectly symmetrical. Some had slight irregularities in texture. Others had subtle variations in color. "Yes, I noticed. Is it intentional?" "Absolutely. There's a concept called Wabi-Sabi, the beauty of imperfection and impermanence. It is related to Seihin." Daisuke picked up a bowl with a small crack. When Westerners see a crack, they see a defect, something that needs to be hidden or fixed. In Japan, we have a technique called Kintsugi, repairing broken ceramics with gold. Gold? Why? Because the crack is part of the object's history. Instead of pretending it never broke, we celebrate the fracture. We make it visible, beautiful. The piece becomes more valuable because of imperfection, not despite it. Jonah remained silent, processing. "Seihin is similar," Daisuke continued. "It's not about creating a perfectly minimalist life where you have nothing and live like a monk. It's about accept enough." He put the bowl back. "You're going to make mistakes. You're going to buy unnecessary things sometimes. You're going to get distracted. You're going to fall back into old patterns. And that's okay. The important thing is to keep coming back. Always come back to practice." "That reminds me of something," Jonah said. "I've realized that the fewer things I have, the more I value what I do have. Does that make sense?" Perfect sense. When you have 80 shirts, none of them are special. When you have 8 shirts that you truly love, each one matters. You take better care of them, you appreciate them more. Daisuke smiled. This applies to everything. Friends, commitments, even information. The less you consume, the more you absorb. Jonah thought about how he used to read dozens of articles a day, but he remembered almost nothing. Now he read less, but really processed what I was reading. There's one last concept I want to teach you, Daisuke said. Ichigo ichi. Once a date. The idea that each moment is unique and will never be repeated exactly the same way. How does this relate to simplicity? Because when you're overwhelmed, rushing, distracted, you miss moments. They pass by and you don't even notice. But when you simplify, when you create space, you're able to be present. Present, and then every moment becomes precious. Chapter 10. The Legacy. Today, 2 years after that first meeting, Jonah's apartment is unrecognizable, not because he spent a fortune on renovations, but because he removed everything that was unnecessary. The room has a comfortable sofa, a wooden table, a bookshelf with his favorite books. Not all the books he bought, but the ones that truly mean something to him. And on the table, a single piece of ceramic, a bowl made by Daisuke. Simple, elegant, with small imperfections that make it unique. Jonah no longer has 3 cars, he has one, which he actually uses and takes care of. His closet is no longer overflowing. He has 20 pieces of clothing that he loves and wears regularly. No more streaming subscriptions I never watched, apps I never opened, or products that were forgotten in drawers. He has less. And that's why he has more mental clarity, more energy, more time, more peace. He still works at the same company, but now he gets home at 6 p.m. because he learned to focus on what's essential and say no to what's superfluous. He still has a smartphone, but without social media, without constant notifications, without the compulsion to check it every 3 minutes. He still buys things. But now, he thinks beforehand. He asks, do I need this? Does it serve my purpose? Will it bring me real value or just momentary satisfaction? Most of the time, he leaves the item on the shelf. And do you know what the most surprising result of all this was? Jonah saved more money in the last 2 years than in the previous 10, because he stopped spending on things he didn't need to impress people who didn't care. He uses that money for experiences, meaningful trips, dinners with close friends, pottery classes with Daisuke, because he's discovered that creating something with his own hands brings a satisfaction that no purchased product ever could. So let's recap what we learned from Jonah's story. First, Seihin is not about poverty. It's about the mental discipline of choosing simplicity in a world that constantly pushes us towards excess. Second, every object you own, every appointment on your calendar, every notification on your phone consumes a little bit of your mental energy. External simplicity creates internal clarity. Third, the paradox of choice is real. The more options you have, the harder it becomes to decide and the less satisfied you are with your decisions. Fourth, consumption is often emotional anesthesia. We're not buying objects, we're trying to buy peace of mind, and that never works in the long run. Fifth, Zanshin, total attention to the present moment. It is the antidote to the fragmented and scattered mind that modern life forces us to have. And lastly, Wabi-Sabi and Kintsugi teach us that imperfection is part of the journey. You don't need to be perfectly minimalist, you just need to keep returning to the practice. The question I leave for you is, what in your life is consuming your mental energy without adding real value? It could be physical possessions. It could be social commitments you don't want to attend but feel obligated to. It could be apps on your phone. It could be toxic relationships. It could be worries about things you can't control. Whatever it is, what would happen if you simply let go? Jonah discovered that less can be exponentially more, and you can too. If you enjoyed this content, I invite you to watch the last video posted this week, where I talked about the mistake of trying too hard for someone who doesn't deserve it, and about why letting go is the greatest act of self-love you can have. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, because this is the kind of content we'll continue to bring you. Content that truly transforms, not just entertains. Thanks for your attention so far, and remember, simplicity is a mental discipline. Practice it every day, and little by little, you'll notice the difference. See you in the next video.